All right, we're on our next set of notes, and this new way of factoring is something called factor by grouping. The key thing that you have to know for factor by grouping is it's 4 terms. So have you noticed, like, we started with GCF, then from there we went to something with 2 terms, and we used difference of squares, if that would work. Then from there we did trinomial factoring, and that was 3 terms, and so this one is now 4 terms, factor by grouping. I think factor by grouping is kind of fun, so I hope you enjoy it as well. So for factor by grouping, what we're going to do, step number 1 says group the first 2 terms together and then the last 2 terms together. And so what I mean by that is we're going to go ahead and draw in these parentheses. Now the key thing when we draw in these parentheses is you see how I keep the sign in front of that 3rd term, so make sure you are doing that as well. And so then it says factor out the GCF for each binomial. So for my first binomial, I have an x as my GCF, so I'm going to factor that out. X squared. Whew. And then when I divide each term by x squared, I get x plus 7. For my second binomial, I'm going to factor out this time a positive 2. And I get x plus 7. Now my goal here is that 2 of my binomials are identical. If one of my binomials is not identical, what I have to do is I have to think about what my GCF could possibly be. So fix it or fix my dividing so they are identical. Now step number 3, the GCF from each binomial will become one factor. So that is going to be x squared plus 2. Okay, so the GCF from each binomial became one factor, and the remaining binomial will be the other factor. So x plus 7 is now my other factor. And then we're going to use FOIL or remultiply. So, you could use Punnett square, whatever you want, to check your answer. So to check my answer here, what I'm going to do is distributive property real quick. X squared times x is x to the 3rd. X squared times 7 is 7x squared. Now 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 7 is 14. And I have exactly what I started with. Now let's go ahead and try a couple more examples. Now let's take a look at number 1. So for number 1, we're going to go ahead and again group the first 2 terms together and then the last 2 terms together. Again, remember to keep that sign in front of that 3rd term. Then we're going to factor out the GCF from each binomial. For my first binomial, the GCF is 3x squared. And when I take each term divided by 3x squared, I'm left with x plus 5. Then I'm going to go ahead and take each term and divide out a negative 2. And when I take negative 2x divided by negative 2, I get a positive x. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 is a positive 5. So right here, kind of what I was saying right at the beginning, we want to make sure we're taking out a GCF. So my 2 binomials are identical. Now, each GCF will become one factor. And then my other remaining binomial will be the other factor, so x plus 5. Now this is my final answer, but I'm going to go ahead and remultiply just to double check that I did this correctly. So 3x squared times x is 3x to the 3rd. 3x squared times 5 is 15x squared. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Perfect. All right, number 2, same thing. Let's go ahead and group together. So factor by grouping, first 2 terms, last 2 terms. My GCF here is going to be 4x. Divide each term by 4x, we get 2x plus 3. Then I'm going to take the GCF from that one, which is just a positive y, and then divide each term by positive y. I get 2x plus 3. I'm going to pause for a moment, make sure my 2 binomials are identical. They are. And so now I'm going to take the GCF from each binomial and put it together as one factor. and then the other binomial will be my other factor. Before I box that in, I'm going to go ahead and double check my work. So I'm going to re-multiply. So 4x times 2x is 8x squared. 4x times 3 is 12x. Y times 2xy is 2xy. Y times 3 is 3y. And good, I did that correctly. Number 3, same thing. Have you guys noticed that with this grouping, we have to have 4 terms for us to be able to put these parentheses in place with the first 2 and second 2. Anything else, it wouldn't work. So again, 4 terms, we do this method, factor by grouping. So my GCF with this first binomial is x squared. And then when I divide, I come up with x plus 2. My next one, so again, my goal is to get that x plus 2 to be identical. My GCF this time is going to be negative 5 again. So negative 5x divided by negative 5 is a positive x. Negative 10 divided by negative 5 is now a positive 2. My 2 binomials are identical. Okay, so we're going to put together the GCF from each binomial, and then we're going to put together the other binomial, and here are my 2 factors. Now I'm going to remultiply very quickly. X squared times x is x to the third. X squared times 2, 2x squared. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. And it matches. So we did that one correctly. Okay, now let's move on to number 4. Number 4 is same thing, 4 terms. 4 terms, I can go ahead and put in my grouping symbols, group that together. My GCF here is going to be x cubed. And when I divide each term by x cubed, I'm going to get x plus 4. The GCF of my next binomial is positive 2, and I get x plus 4. And then from here, I'm going to take the GCF from each binomial and make one factor. And then the binomials will get put together. So I have x plus 4. That's my other factor. Now to remultiply, x cubed times x is x to the fourth. X cubed times 4, 4x to the third. 2 times x is positive 2x. 2 times 4 is positive 8. When I double check, I did do it right, and that's it. Okay, perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and do one more. Number 5 will be the last one that we do together. The other 5 we will do in class together. So I have 4 terms for number 5. Put in the grouping symbols. We're going to group that together. The GCF from my first binomial is 3y. Factor that out. 6y squared divided by 3y is 2y. Negative 3y divided by 3y is negative 1. And then from my other binomial, the GCF here is a positive z. So when I divide each term by positive z, I'm left with 2y minus 1. When I rewrite this, it will be 3y plus z times the quantity 2y minus 1. Now I'm going to remultiply just to make sure I did this correctly. So 3y times 2y is 6y squared. 3y times negative 1 is negative 3y. Z times 2y is positive 2yz. Z times negative 1 is negative z. All right, they match. I did it correctly. Hey, and that's it for these notes. I will see you guys next time in class.